That's right.
What's up?
That's right.
Yes.
Just say hi, you met him, so.
I think you're fine.
Huh?
Yeah, whatever.
Indu, you ready? Oops, sorry. You're on stage.
Okay, the clock's ticking.
So, before you start recording, I'll just explain to everyone, even though we have a standing room only audience, we're going to go through all the presentations because they will be recorded and they'll be shown on our virtual ocean platform or pavilion. So that way they'll be recorded for perpetuity and be great. So, all right, can we start? Should I start recording? All right, so I'm going to call the session to order. My name is Richard Delaney, and I have the honor of serving as the president of the board of directors of the Global Ocean Forum, and also have a day job as president of the Center for Coastal Studies in Massachusetts. So tonight's program is entitled Investing in Ocean Nature-Based Solutions to Mitigate and Adapt to Climate Change. A lot of good content in that sentence. And we will use this event to have our panelists share experiences, lessons learned, and with each other and with you in terms of initiatives that have worked in investing in collaborative mitigation and adaptation initiatives, including work from a group called the International Partnership on Marine Protected Areas, Biodiversity, and Climate Change. And interestingly, that very creative group originated at a COP 2-3 years ago. So here we are tonight, and our experts are deep in knowledge, but I will not take this opportunity to give you all of their resumes. You can go on the Global Ocean Forum's website, and you can click Virtual Ocean Pavilion, and you will see the resumes and background of all of these folks. I will, though, take this minute to thank our co-organizers, the Government of Chile, the Global Ocean Forum, and its executive branch called the International Coastal and Ocean Organization, the Urban Coast Institute, based at Monmouth University in the United States, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and in particular the Office of the National Marine Sanctuaries, and in particular one of the largest sanctuaries, the Gulf of Farallones and Cordell Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And then lastly, again, the International Partnership on MPAs, Biodiversity, and Climate Change. I do have one announcement. We were disappointed to hear from the Chilean delegation that the COP presidency has called the Chilean minister and he, by extension, his staff, to go immediately this afternoon, just like this afternoon, to join the GGA consultations. More important than entertaining us tonight, but there he is. And we didn't have time to get a substitute. And I also will say Dr. Richard Spinrad will be the first person to speak, but he too has another appointment to go to. So, and then halfway after the first half, I'm going to turn over the moderating duties to my colleague, Dr. Peter Ricketts, and he will introduce the rest of the panel. So, Rick, all I can say in further introduction is I've seen you crisscrossing the grounds out here for the last 5 days, nonstop, back and forth, showing up here, showing up there, speaking. I know you were just out at the Ocean Pavilion a little while ago, I saw you there. All I can do is thank you for your stamina, your commitment, all of which converts into leadership for NOAA, and we're pleased that you are really providing ocean leadership at NOAA for us. So the stage is yours. You want to speak from here, or? Whichever you prefer. If you have slides, I do not. Okay, why don't you come right here?
Thank you, Richard. Really appreciate that. Yeah, I'll say one thing for COP. You get your steps in here, don't you? So, and I appreciate your recognizing the activity that NOAA's had here. We have a pretty big delegation. Got a great staff that's working it, and we're delighted to be able to contribute to any number of discussions, including this important discussion tonight. I also want to thank the Forum's board for inviting me and making this possible. Ocean nature-based solutions to mitigate and adapt to climate change is such an important problem. And I'd like to use this opportunity to set the stage, talk a little bit about what we're doing at NOAA in this context. And I'll start simply by reminding the audience just how the ocean does play a vital role in mitigating and addressing climate change. And we know from the scientific information that known ocean-based climate solutions could provide what is an astonishing 20% of the greenhouse gas emission reductions needed to get us to the 1.5 degree temperature goal. When you think about that, there was a concept a few years ago put together by some Princeton scientists called the wedge theory that said we're going to get the solution to climate change by not a single special golden bullet, as it were, but a number of solutions. So there's this sort of wedge of contributions, and anything that contributes 20% as a wedge to the solution has got to be an important contribution. In the U.S., the Biden-Harris administration launched the America the Beautiful, which is a decade-long campaign to conserve and restore our nation's lands and waters to the tune of 30%. That's the cornerstone, that we will conserve and restore 30% of America's lands and waters by 2030. And to help us reach this goal and the benefits that conservation brings to communities, we have prioritized at NOAA designating new marine protected areas throughout the United States territorial waters. I remind the audience also that when the exclusive economic zone of the United States was defined several decades ago, overnight we doubled the size of the nation. Think about that. So when we talk about conservation of lands and waters, looking at our EEZs is a critical aspect of the solution. MPAs, marine protected areas, and other area-based conservation and restoration actions can be some of our most potent tools to achieve the emission reductions and build resilience to climate impacts. And that's possible because the blue carbon ecosystems that exist within these protected areas, like salt marshes, like seagrasses and mangroves, those ecosystems can capture and store carbon dioxide, thereby reducing carbon emissions in the atmosphere. The ocean-based carbon sequestration, which depends on contributions from processes such as kelp biomass export and deep sea and marine vertebrate deadfalls, is increasingly being recognized as a critical carbon removal and storage service. These blue carbon ecosystems not only have a greater tendency to sequester carbon than terrestrial ecosystems, but also provide greater longevity in the storage of captured carbon, thus validating the necessity and the value to account for coastal blue carbon in climate mitigation goals. Blue carbon should be incorporated into marine spatial planning and should be considered an MPA designation and management. As a co-benefit, MPA managers can leverage blue carbon to finance MPAs as certain management actions produce greater sequestration gains. And that kind of thinking is what has to be brought to the considerations on carbon budget development. Understanding and accounting for the benefits of these blue carbon ecosystems is an area that we at NOAA are prioritizing. We lead high-impact scientific efforts to understand, protect, and restore blue carbon systems, explore options for carbon sequestration, and enhance ecological processes, especially within MPAs. So one of the things that I'm excited to announce is the newest addition to NOAA's Blue Carbon in Marine Protected Areas series, a series of publications that are meant to inform and guide MPA managers in the assessment, protection, and management of blue carbon habitats and processes. The newest publication, Blue Carbon in Marine Protected Areas Part 3, an evaluation of sedimentary carbon stocks in Greater Farallones and Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuaries, illustrates the value of seafloor sediments, the largest non-fossil pool of organic carbon on the planet. We found that muddy substrates in the area of these national marine sanctuaries contain substantial amounts of stored carbon, approximately 9 million metric tons, which is equivalent to the amount of carbon dioxide created from burning 3.5 billion gallons of gasoline or driving over 7 million cars for a year. This report expands our scientific understanding of non-fossil organic carbon in the marine environment, and this information can help guide decisions on marine protection to ensure the utilization of these resources supports our global carbon mitigation goals. By protecting these carbon hotspots with MPAs, we can ensure that the carbon will not be released through activities like trawling or mining or oil and gas extraction. I also want to emphasize that the benefits of MPAs extend beyond mitigation. They are also key tools for enhancing climate resilience and adapting to climate impacts. Protected areas can build resilience of natural ecosystems, including wildlife and their habitats, and provide natural buffers along coasts to reduce the impacts, for example, of storms and flooding. MPAs can also preserve ocean refugia, areas they are changing more and changing more slowly, and offer space for vulnerable species. They can provide ecologically connected, safe landing places for species shifting their ranges due to climate pressures, and they can protect and restore vibrant, biodiverse ecosystems that buffer against climate impacts. Part of the solution here, of course, is going to be on international collaboration as well. So let me say a few words about that. In order to fully realize the potential that climate mitigation and adaptation benefits of MPAs, we must work together as a global community. At NOAA, our mission is to observe and understand our ocean's atmosphere and climate, and to share that knowledge and information with others. We're also responsible for being stewards of coastal and marine ecosystems and resources. In line with this mission, we are committed to enhanced international collaboration to better understand the role MPAs play as ocean nature-based solutions. For example, we are a founding member of the International Partnership on MPAs, Biodiversity, and Climate Change, which was launched at COP25 to provide leadership and international scientific collaboration to advance the role of MPAs in conserving biodiversity and mitigating and addressing climate change. At COP28, the partnership has showcased the importance of MPAs in tackling climate challenges, emphasizing the need for continued international collaboration, shared case studies with the MPA community of practice, and announced deliverables that advance the understanding of how MPAs can be used to mitigate and adapt to climate impacts. The United States and NOAA are also committed to technical exchange and capacity building among countries to improve carbon and coastal management. We take great pride in being a leader for providing authoritative climate information and for developing the tools, technologies, and programs that put the information in the hands of decision makers and community leaders. One program that I'm particularly proud of is the NOAA Blue Carbon Inventory Project. Through this project, NOAA is working with other countries, such as Costa Rica, Indonesia, and Ghana, to advance the development of tools, approaches, and capacity for integrating coastal wetlands and blue carbon ecosystems into their national greenhouse gas inventories. These efforts are also enhancing the management of these critical ecosystems to realize their climate co-benefits and ecosystem services. In addition to bilateral and regional collaboration, the NOAA Blue Carbon Inventory Project harnesses the expertise of multiple U.S. agencies and partners from the private and public sector. It is abundantly clear that MPAs have the great potential as ocean nature-based solutions, and well-managed and thoughtfully designated MPAs can have a dramatic impact throughout the marine environment well beyond the geographical boundaries. NOAA is currently undertaking the designation process for 6 proposed national marine sanctuaries. That number still blows my mind. 6 national marine sanctuaries spanning from the Pacific remote islands to the U.S. West Coast, Great Lakes, and East Coast. Expansion of the National Marine Sanctuary System will advance the goals of the Biden-Harris administration's America the Beautiful initiative to address nature loss, climate change, and inequitable access to the outdoors, including better engaging underrepresented groups and indigenous and native peoples. Through continued collaboration and science-based management, we can fully realize this potential and ensure that MPAs are restoring and conserving ecosystems protecting valuable carbon stores in the seabed, and enhancing carbon sequestration in healthy blue carbon ecosystems. Thank you very much.
Doctor, do you have time for one question before we run?
I do.
Should there be a question pressing on anyone's mind? Okay. Again, thanks again for your
Thank you.
leadership and
And
knowledge.
I apologize for
Frank,
starting off, but I really appreciate
we
it.
understand. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Rich, I have a couple of questions, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
I'm so impressed by your very, very informative presentation. I knew about the America the Beautiful, but very vaguely, broad in, awareness only. My question is, how much funding has been allocated to this program? I mean, it's an impressive, very broad program, because, does this current Congress need to reauthorize or provide the funding? I'm a bit nervous about that.
So we are provided sufficient funds to perform the activities associated with the National Marine Sanctuary Office. There, I've given you the official response.
What's the rest of the answer?
The rest of the answer is there are some funds. So through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, we've received some additional resources to help with these designation processes. The concern, of course, is that, as I think you all know as experts in this area, it's not about just the designation. That's an intensive, labor-intensive process. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of public engagement, there's a lot of analysis, there's a lot of legal interpretation associated with that. But then there's the management, and in these cases, the co-management. And so we are currently, in addition to the additional funds we got on a one-time basis, we are looking to request additional resources, mostly for workforce within NOAA, to make sure we've got the people that can manage these additional sanctuaries. I'll just add that I was the head of the National Ocean Service, which is the home office, if you will, for our Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. And we went, I'll get the numbers wrong, but it was probably a dozen years without any designations. And now we've got 6 on the books right now. So for us, it's kind of like going from 0 to 80 miles an hour immediately, and trying to figure out how to staff up to do that and have the resources is a critical challenge, but we are committed to getting the resources to make this work. Thank you. Appreciate that question.
Just to follow up, very quick question. Do you have partnerships with the private sector, philanthropy? Because in this, the COP, we were talking about how governments are really in difficulty in managing all of this, and we have to engage the private sector and philanthropy.
One of the, yes, is the short answer, and one of the secret weapons we have, in fact, is there are obviously things we can and cannot do with public resources. There is, in fact, a National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, and we work very closely with them, and their job, part of their job is fundraising to develop programs and capabilities that may not be either allowable or feasible for us to support with our public resources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you again. I'd like to now introduce Dr. Peter Ricketts, who will take over the role of MC for the next panel. They're already at the up on the podium, and Peter will give a little bit more information about himself and introduce the rest of the panelists.
Thank you very much, Rich, and good evening, everybody. So my name is Peter Ricketts. I'm a professor of Earth and Environmental Science at Acadia University in Wolfville, Nova Scotia, Canada, on the east coast of Canada. I'm also a member of the board of Global Ocean Forum. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our next two panelists for this evening's event. And I'll just give a little bit of background to each of them, and then ask them to make their comments. First, I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Natalie Hilmy, who is an expert in macroeconomics and international finance. She obtained her PhD in 2000, and after a period of time as a financial analyst in the pharmaceutical industry, she joined the International University of Monaco as Professor of Macroeconomics and Finance in 2006. Her research work focused on hedge funds research and applied research on investment strategies. In 2010, she joined the Centre Scientifique de Monaco as section head of environmental economics and collaborated with IAEA's environmental laboratories to initiate correlation studies between environmental sciences and economics to better evaluate the socio-economic extent of impacts and the costs of action versus inaction with regard to carbon emissions. In 2011, her postdoctoral research was on a multidisciplinary approach of sustainable development, and she was the lead author for the IPCC special report on oceans and cryosphere and also for the AR6 report. Our second panelist is Mr. Tony MacDonald, who is a director of the Monmouth University, of the Monmouth University Urban Coast Institute, and is a director of the Global Ocean Forum. From 1998 to 2005, Tony was the executive director of the Coastal States Organization, which represents the interests of the governors of the United States' 35 coastal states and territories on matters pertaining to coastal and ocean policy, and basically acts as a lobby group in Washington, D.C. Prior to joining the Coastal States Organization, Tony was the special counsel and director of environmental affairs at the American Association of Port Authorities, where he represented the International Association of Ports and Harbors at the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, on negotiations on the London Convention. He also practiced law with a private firm in Washington, D.C., working on environmental and legislative issues, and served as the Washington, D.C. environmental legislative representative with the mayor of the city of New York. So with those brief introductions, it's now my pleasure to ask our first panelist, Dr. Natalie Hilme, to speak, and she will be talking on ocean ecosystem services. Over to you, Natalie. I think you have slides?
Yes.
Yes, and I hope that device I gave you will actually move the slides, I hope.
Okay. Is it working?
Yeah, the microphone is on.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this session. I'm going to talk about marine ecosystems and their services as blue carbon. First, what are ecosystem services? Ecosystem services are the services that the ecosystem render to the humanity. And we have 4 categories: provisioning, regulating, supporting, and cultural ecosystem services. We know that the ocean plays a key role in global climate regulation through uptake and storage of heat and carbon dioxide. So what is blue carbon? The blue carbon, in fact, capture two different things, the coastal and the marine ecosystems. And when we talk about nature-based solution, we can use a definition by the IUCN. The nature-based solutions are defined as actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystems as strategies for simultaneously solving both socioeconomic and environmental problems. In October 2021, I organized a workshop in Monaco, and the objective was to understand what is blue carbon, and the workshop brought together natural scientists and social scientists. And we studied the tropical and temperate coastal ecosystems We know that coastal vegetated ecosystems have been and are still currently being lost or degraded worldwide. And this include mangroves, seagrass meadows, and tidal salt marshes. This is from our paper, and you can see here examples of ecosystems and processes along a gradient of actions that can have negative, neutral, or positive effects on carbon storage. And now I will talk about coastal ecosystem services as blue carbon. First, we have mangroves, and I wanted to show you the different categories of ecosystem services, the provisioning, regulating, supporting, and cultural. For provisioning, we have timber, fuel wood, and charcoal, and you can see that we have already some studies and numbers. For regulating services, we have flood, storms, and erosion control, prevention of saltwater intrusion, carbon sequestration. For supporting services, we have breeding, spawning, and nursery. And for cultural services, we have tourism, education, and worship. About salt marsh ecosystems, we also have the 4 categories. And for the provisioning, we have raw materials and food to livestock. For regulating, we have coastal protection, rainwater absorbance, water filtration, and carbon sequestration. Supporting services include shelter, breeding, and nursery ground to fisheries. And cultural services represent tourism, recreation, education, and research. About seagrass ecosystem, we have also the 4 categories that you can see here. And we have already some interesting numbers that are coming from the different studies that you can see on this slide. And then we have the marine ecosystem services of blue carbon. And this is the open water and deep sea ecosystems. The open ocean and deep sea ecosystems are essential to the human perturbed carbon cycle, are the largest stores of anthropogenic carbon after the atmosphere, and play a crucial role in maintaining anthropogenic carbon in the deep ocean thanks to the biological carbon pump. And I wanted to emphasize key deep sea ecosystem goods and services. And on this table, you can see the categories of ecosystem services and their component for the deep sea. What is interesting is to see that we have already some economic values for the deep sea. If you look well, most of the numbers are in million, except oil and gas. So it means that if we drill oil and gas, it will have a big economic value. So it is important to explain to the policymakers that this is only the benefit, but it will cost much more because it will cause climate change, and the cost of climate change is very, very important. And we have some values about this, but okay, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll now pass it over to Tony.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I appreciate the comments. And I'm going to take you sort of on a different journey. And thinking about these issues, it occurs to me, first of all, that listening to Dr. Spinrad's remarks, I mean, really what we're talking about here is something that we're here at the UNFCCC to urge ambition in addressing the climate issue. But I think the other thing we need to come at this with is humility, because really when we talk about nature-based ecosystems, when we're talking about investing in marine protected areas, we're really talking about letting the ocean do what it's been doing for millions of years. And so we really need to approach these ambitions with humility. We are really here at a climate conference as an ocean community, because climate, we used to think that the greatest impact on the ocean was pollution. things that humans did over time that we could correct through our environmental regulations. But now we know that actually we're interrupting a system, again, that's been perfecting itself over millions of years. And now we have ambition and high ambition to see how do we now tinker with that system to correct the incredible things and damage we've done through climate change. So really, I do think I want to put that in that context, and now I'm going to bring you down to the world in which I live. And so I'm going to be thinking about marine conservation and marine protection within the context of regional management. So again, one of my focus areas is thinking about data and how important data is to this and investing in data. But in thinking about that data, they're not data points, they're not science and research experiments, but they're really about characterizing both ecological and social systems. Because right now, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about whether designating marine protected areas or taking on new challenges of things like marine carbon dioxide removal or sequestration. So within that context, again, I'm going to take you a little bit where I am and place you there, and maybe indulge me for a moment to sort of tell you 10 years ago, or over 10 years ago, I started a project in the Mid-Atlantic area of New Jersey and New York that goes from New York down to Virginia to develop something called the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal, which is really to make visual and make apparent the information that we do have in a way that people will understand as they think about how to balance the competing demands. So if this works, next you'll hear a little bit of a video, if it works.
University in West Long Branch, New Jersey. It's located just 1 mile from the beach and 3 miles from the town where my parents met. The places where my family and many others built our memories took a hard hit on October 29, 2012, when Superstorm Sandy devastated many of the shore communities. Recently, I attended a lecture in New York City by the Wildlife Conservation Society, where I was struck by one slide, which illustrated the potential power of marine spatial planning. It was simply an overlay of areas in New York City that were inundated by Sandy, with a historical map of New York City wetlands, long ago filled and developed. You're probably not surprised there was almost an exact match. In addition to the increasing threats from coastal storms and from sea level rise, the demands of ocean use off of New Jersey are increasing. These include ports, commercial navigation, telecommunications, and offshore wind energy, and many others. Marine spatial planning is like a big jigsaw puzzle. There are corner and edge pieces that everybody knows about and are essential to frame the picture. Splotches of color that some folks recognize, but others don't. And all of those seemingly indistinguishable pieces and complex shapes that come tumbling out of the box when you first turn it over. When you start to put together a puzzle by yourself, it seems a bit overwhelming, but then your family and friends pull up a chair. They see things you don't, and before you know it, the picture, piece by piece, comes together, and what was once indecipherable becomes clear. The Urban Coast Institute, in collaboration with the Mid-Atlantic states and other partners, is now developing an ocean data portal. With the help of fishermen, scientists, recreational, and other users, we're beginning to put together a new ocean jigsaw puzzle in a new way. So please, pull up a chair to the Ocean Data Portal table. The stakes are high, but we'll certainly learn something from each other, and maybe we'll have some fun along the way.
So thank you for indulging me for that, but I really think it tells the story that I want to tell a little bit about. I do think we need to think about data as not information, but data as a means toward understanding and characterizing places and people in a way that really will help them understand where they fit into this decision-making process. So thinking about that, I first want to acknowledge my colleague, Jay Odell, who's the Monmouth University Urban Coast Institute Fisheries and Conservation Fellow, for helping me put together this presentation. I've relied on him a lot. I'm a mere lawyer trying to really gather this information and put it in a context that can inform decision-making and engage the public and the stakeholders in why we're doing this and why it's so important. I think we heard some of those points from our previous presenter. So when I think about managing data and thinking about data and how I can form it, I like to think about what decisions are we making, what do we want to inform. So really I have to understand a little bit more specifically about the sort of how fisheries science and management is changing over time. Traditionally it was really based on a concept of steady state ocean environment that it just no longer exists. So we're really working a lot on things like stock assessments based on old data and how many fish are there and how many fish have been impacted in the future. That is not the format that we're talking about here at the Climate Convention. Recent studies indicate that most of the world's MPAs lack climate adaptation plans. So thinking about the appropriateness of the MPA and what that mechanism is and how we use that in a climate change and altered environment is something that data can really help us address, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Climate-driven range shifts and altered productivity require us to evaluate and adapt current and future MPAs and to invest in and adopt climate-resilient fisheries approaches. So I do think we need to think about this. I think we had a very good presentation from Dr. Spinrad about how we can think about MPAs to do the function and understand better how they can, functioning naturally, manage carbon better and absorb carbon. But we do need to be a little bit more proactive and adaptive in thinking about the role of MPAs and how data can be used to think about this and manage those resources. So this is just a slide generally, again, saying I think there is a foundation of data underlying these stories, but I think there is also a lot of great opportunities that are available. Certainly diverse ocean sensing and fishery stock assessment surveys. We're going to see advancements of that with autonomy, with other ways to be thinking about that and characterizing fish within the context of both the physical, chemical environments and the impact it has on local communities who depend on those fisheries for their economic issues. So we can talk about gross economic impacts of fisheries, but that's much more important at the artisanal and local scale because it might impact that community much differently. So we need to be able to adapt the data to be thinking about how it impacts people's lives. We see certainly opportunities to really use fishing industry data collection via our electronic monitoring network. So really involve the users in the data collection and incorporate that into systems and management. An issue that's very prevalent in the area that I work is offshore wind energy. And again, that's considered to be a climate solution. It certainly can be from a mitigation perspective, but it needs to be put very much in the context of what data can that add to our understanding of the ecosystem such that it will continue to inform our management of those resources as we mitigate the impacts of wind on the site-specific frameworks, but also involving those industry partners, everything from our local fishermen to the wind industry to the navigation and port community in that data collection process. Thinking about citizen science and data collection by consumer electronics abroad. This has really come enormously fast and is going to exceed my knowledge and speed up increasingly. So how can we really crowdsource this data in a way that can be incorporated? And also think about non-extractive survey techniques, environmental DNA, acoustics, and other issues. So there are a lot of emerging opportunities where data can be part of the solution. And there's also amazing capacity now to analyze and consider that data. So along with collecting data, and along with engaging the communities, you're going to need a data governance system to be thinking about how to manage this data in hopefully creating a transparent and shared environment of the data while at the same time encouraging some of the economic investments. And you can see how that can work on scale depending on what your community is, whether it's a local community in a disadvantaged community or someplace like the Mid-Atlantic, which is fairly data rich, but also extremely active and extremely impacted historically and with future proposed uses. Thinking about that, I also think about some of the dynamics that are being driven by some of these international agreements and by some of the national commitments. So we hear a lot at the Climate Convention about high-level panels on this and international commitments to that. And really, we do have the high-level panel on planning for sustainable ocean economies. And we have high-level panels looking at marine protected areas. But really, what I'm thinking about is what is the role of marine protected areas within the broader context of a 100% approach. We really do need to think we now have the areas beyond national jurisdiction. We now have biodiversity. So we have actually more potential tools, but also more potential silos if we don't really think about this as 100% managed systems for these multiple purposes. So managing for these multiple benefits include biodiversity, conservation, food production, increasingly important around the world, and the carbon sequestration elements that were mentioned earlier, maritime industries, and human well-being. So how do we get there together? And I do think we have now increasing tools, not both in addition to the data, but also some of these governance issues and new international treaties and domestic efforts and local efforts to actually establish those governance frameworks and those policy frameworks to implement them. So 30 by 30 is a good driver. It is very fundamental, but I think most people understand, I'm not a scientist, that it really is a baseline. It really is an aspirational baseline to say at a minimum, we need to do 30% so they can perform the natural functions that I was alluding to earlier to do what it needs to do. And we know where there's critical areas that we really want to be sure that we do not interfere with. So thinking about complex structure like corals, there might be a lot of areas that continue to be thinking about these more static marine protected areas based on traditional borders. But that will probably not work in a climate environment. If you talk to my local fishermen in our region, they know that they're fishing. They might have been skeptics about the details and the science of climate change, but they're not skeptics about how seeing their fish stocks move into different areas, and they're seeing that increasingly. So thinking about dynamic MPAs and other effective conservation measures, protecting habitats and species as they shift is going to be increasingly important. In our area in the U.S., we were able to use our ocean data portal to actually work with the scallop industry to think about how to protect some of the cold water corals in the canyons off our shore. So that was a collaborative process using data to really find out how we can both support their industry, but be sure that those valuable and irreplaceable corals are protected as well. So I think that's going to be a role that I think everybody can imagine how data could play an important and fundamental role in understanding how to do dynamic MPA and OECM measures at a variety of different scales. So when I mentioned regional scale marine planning and adaptive management is going to be essential to what we're doing, and that region will depend on social factors, ecological factors, and many others. We have some slides over here to kind of illustrate the reality of what we're doing, some of the pictures. I just love that picture of the whales are coming back to the mid-Atlantic, and seeing that breaching whale in front of the Empire State Building really says it all. We really can have it all. We can have a more productive and vibrant ecosystem at the same time that we're sustaining ocean uses and some of these other solutions like offshore wind. Think about how to engage some of the local communities and the fishermen in that exercise so that they have ownership of that, and thinking about how that data can be displayed in ways that inform that. The map over there is from the Ocean Data Portal and reflects some of the whale migrations and how it relates to some of the proposed wind farms. So we really have the capacity to use this in, I think, really new and inventive ways while protecting the ecological benefits as the ecological services that were just explained, as well as some of the other economic opportunities, which are going to be essential to maintaining support for these efforts. So I'm going to come back to some of the conclusions in the U.S. of where we are right today. We're in the Climate Convention. So recently the U.S. released its 5th National Climate Assessment, and some of the key messages related to oceans are not going to be a surprise to anybody in the room today or listening online. Unprecedented climate impacts threaten these ecosystems and human well-being. So hopefully I've sort of explained why I think that's true and why everybody in their community can witness that. So really think about these climate-driven changes as threatening critical connections between people in the ocean. That, to me, is not the way I hear it expressed sometimes. I think these are social, ecological issues, and I don't think they're analyzed that way often enough, especially for indigenous people and others that are more disadvantaged and do not have access to things. So thinking about that. I heard one of the presentations earlier this week that really has stuck with me, that maybe a fundamental principle of all of our climate responses and these plans are thinking about the equitable benefits. How is equity served by the different choices that we're making, and that equity around social issues? So I think that really is something that we should keep in mind moving forward. So outcomes for ecosystems and people will depend on the ability to have the data to inform these ecological social systems to adapt to this pace of change. So we do need better understanding about the pace of this change, what it's going to mean, not only where we are now, what are additional protections, but how do we scale our responses in response to what we can know about the pace of climate change and its impact on the oceans. Climate change is altering marine-related economic activities. Again, we need to think about that. We need to think about what the motivations are that really are going to relate to that, and think about the cultural changes and its impacts. In my case, my local communities don't want to change at all. We've lived at the Jersey Shore. We love the Jersey Shore. Somebody once said to me, everybody in the world thinks about the ocean the way they related to it as a 12-year-old. And that doesn't matter whether it's in a busy place like New Jersey or some desolate place that now seems pristine. People will want to maintain that. So understanding what those cultural values are in that place and how we use marine protected and other natural-based features to adapt to climate change is something that we need to put front and center. The other thing, and I think this is the conference's message consistently, is that our ocean depends on decisions today. We do need to make some of these decisions today. These aren't research questions only. These aren't questions for speculation. These are really questions of we need to take actions now to really manage the risks that we do know. So we have to understand how we make these decisions about investing in these solutions in a way that we know that we are reducing future risks, we are taking adaptation and mitigation actions now, and that we'll be able to be adapted to the changes that increasingly some of this data and information will allow us to consider. And again, the impacts will be uneven across communities with more harmful outcomes in ocean-reliant, historically marginalized communities. So again, the equity issue needs to be put front and center because, again, at these climate conferences, maybe, although you have a lot of representation of those interests, not really entirely clear that the data and management systems are designed to address those responses. So that's my remarks today. And again, thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you very much, Tony and Natalie, for your very stimulating presentations, and certainly from different perspectives, but coming in and focusing on the whole issue of how we address nature-based solutions. And now as we move past our two presenters, we now have two discussants who will speak about not only just their own perspectives on the topic of this evening's event, but also will provide comments on the two presentations that we've just heard, and also probably on Mr. Spinlad's presentation as well. So our two discussants this evening, first of all, we have Dr. Indu Assam, who is president of Sustainable Oceans and Coasts, LLC, which is a non-governmental agency with a mission of building capacity in less developed countries, especially in South and East Asia, as well as Africa. And this is focusing on governing ocean and coastal resources, how to govern ocean and coastal resources in an environmentally and socially responsible manner. She holds a doctoral degree in marine policy from the University of Delaware and was formerly a senior environmental specialist at the World Bank with 22 years of experience in designing and managing projects in partnership with public and private and community representatives. Her work at the World Bank primarily focused on marine and coastal management in the Africa region, and Indu is also a member of the board of the Global Ocean Forum. Our second discussant is Dr. Larry Hildebrand, who, although supposedly retired, continues to work on coastal and ocean governance, coastal ocean governance and management, as he has done for over 45 years. After a long and successful career with Environment Canada, Larry went back to school and received his PhD in coastal and ocean governance from Cardiff University in Wales. He taught in the Marine Affairs program at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and in 2013 joined the World Maritime University in Malmö, Sweden, as professor and Canadian chair in marine environment protection. He continues as an adjunct professor and special advisor to the World Maritime University and the Sasakawa Global Ocean Institute, and continues to serve the coastal and ocean communities in many capacities, including through the Coastal Zone Canada Association, which he co-founded in 1993, and also the Global Ocean Forum, most recently as editor of the new 2022-23 report of the Roadmap for Ocean and Climate Action, or the ROCRA initiative. First of all, I'm going to ask Indu to share her views and thoughts about the theme of this evening and her responses to the presentations that we've heard, and then I'll pass it on to Larry to follow up. So, Indu, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. I am going to speak from the perspective of a developing country or developing countries, where I worked for a very long time, mostly Africa and then South Asia and then also East Asia. Whenever we design a project in the World Bank, we are asked, what is the value? What are the benefits of your project? Quantify. And that's almost an impossible task because this is in the future. And how can you quantify benefits? So I would usually say the environmental benefits, the social benefits, the communities, the capacity building that's going to be happening with our project funds. But then I can't quantify. So that's why I think, both Tony and Natalie, they emphasize the value of data, and that's really, really important, especially from an economic perspective. The benefits, as much as we can quantify, that's how donors would respond. So from a developing country perspective, they really need resources. Then they reach out to the donors, and then the donors will ask, what are the benefits? And then the developing countries don't have the data and don't have the resources to collect data. So then they turn to a consultant, or maybe a natural resource economist. And those guys are very expensive. So then the country team leader or task manager, as we used to call ourselves, has to pitch in with a design grant, perhaps from the GEF, because the World Bank doesn't give grants, as you know. So things like, very important things like carbon credits. Developing country counterparts don't know what a carbon credit is. So, and also carbon sequestration, what does it mean? How can we do it? What is the value of mangroves? What's the value of the seaweed in sequestering carbon? So these are very, very important aspects that if we can help the developing countries in accessing this data, developing capacity themselves to gather data. And there's very little, I mean, the universities in these countries are developing the capacity, the knowledge, the awareness. They have South-South collaboration, I mean, North-South collaboration, and also South-South collaboration. For instance, India has a lot of capacity and has a lot of universities that collect data, disseminate data, and so on. But countries like Sri Lanka, where I am from, they don't have that capacity, or they don't have money to build that capacity. So the World Bank has lots of projects in the climate change, fisheries, and marine protected areas, those sorts of projects. But then again, the capacity to implement those projects. And some are very, very huge projects, like in India, an integrated coastal zone management is $600 million. But that's sort of a drop in the bucket for India, because the coastal states have a population of 450 million. So if you calculate that, it's like $1.5 per person. But just to wrap up, the grants from GEF, from other donors, is very, very important. And we heard about the 150 million that's in the loss and damage fund. That's also, you know, peanuts, if I may say so, compared to the need. So, I mean, we hope that there will be more contributions to this fund as we go along. The World Bank has a $1.3 billion climate investment fund. Now that's I think, great. But the access to the funds, some countries don't even know about it. Some countries know about it, but don't know how to access. So there again is the capacity building. We were thinking that Global Ocean Forum can help these countries, you know, like draw down money, how to mobilize money, how to set up trust funds to receive money, and so on. So I think all of us in this room have a role to play in, because if we don't help the developing countries, we are lost, we fail, because the global community, the planet, it's all of us. We all have to pitch in. So that's what I would like to say.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Yeah, good. Thank you. Great points. Okay, Larry, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So our speakers have given us a very good sense of the value of these coastal systems and nature-based solutions, the mangroves, the salt marshes, the wetlands and so on. And I think we're getting a good sense of the value, and you've outlined some numbers, which I think are important for us in terms of, of the services they provide. Sometimes we really need to have those hard economic numbers to argue, again, why are we doing this, and how much it's going to cost, and what's the return. So I think our numbers are getting better. I think they stand up well in terms of the return on investment, which is incredibly important. But I think we also have a good sense of just the ecological value, the importance of having these coastal and ocean systems as part of our global ecology, part of our society, quite frankly. And that kind of leads me to thinking about the communities that are important to the process of advancing nature-based solutions. I think of two very different kinds of communities. One are the coastal communities, the folks that live on and interact with the coast and nearshore ocean areas. How are they dependent on coastal systems? How are they threatened by the changes that are occurring in the marine environment? How might they be protected and benefit from the nature-based solutions? This is just not money going into a World Bank pot or something somewhere, but how is it going to bring those returns to the communities? And so I'm wondering about the degree to which those folks which are directly dependent and directly impacted are engaged and involved in the conversations about advancing these nature-based solutions. Are we there yet? Whether it's in the villages of Sri Lanka or Southeast Asia or Africa or New Jersey. Tony, I don't know, in the processes of data management and so on, the folks that are out on the beach or sailing or watching the whales in front of the Empire State Building, are they really engaged in this process? Do they understand the implications? Do they understand the benefits? So we really have to think about the social and the social engagement side of these processes. There has to be benefits that are returned through this. So whether it's a hard cost-benefit analysis or a more societal discussion about the benefits, the need and the benefits that are going to be brought from pursuing these nature-based solutions. The second community I'm thinking about that I've not heard mentioned at all, but a group that I work with quite a bit, is the coastal science and engineering community. Haven't heard a reference in the discussions about nature-based solutions or indeed in terms of the role of climate. These folks, if you think of the U.S., the Army Corps of Engineers, but coastal scientists and engineers have been for decades going about protecting and managing the coast by building stuff and holding back the sea, in our war against the ravages of the ocean. And we know that they're getting, of course, more severe, and there's kind of a digging in, literally, in terms of, well, if my house is going to fall into the ocean, I want a seawall. If the coast is eroding further down, we need breakwaters and those hard structures. That's the way we've been pursuing coastal protection for many, many years. Sure, there's still a role for it in some places, but what is the balance between hard engineering approaches to coastal protection and the nature-based solutions that we're talking about here? I don't think we're engaged in that discussion yet. It's kind of the coastal science and engineering communities over there kind of grumbling and feeling threatened a bit, but kind of still holding on. Darn it, we're going to build that last seawall if it kills us. And how do we really combine those approaches? What's the balance between them? But I really think the stage we're at right now is, sure, we're going to pursue that, but are we engaging all of the appropriate folks, particularly that community? I'm really stuck in the science and engineering community, which I don't think is here at all. Is sort of standing off, feeling threatened, but we really have to get them involved in these discussions and in the solutions that we're pursuing. So I'll end it there, but I'll open it up maybe appropriate to say, who else is missing from these conversations about, how we respond to the impacts of climate change, how we protect and manage our coastal and marine resources. We need to make sure that we have that open tent, that everybody is included in that. So I'm wondering your thoughts about who else needs to be sort of at that table.
Great, thank you very much, Larry. I think I'm gonna just go up here to you better from here, for the time that's remaining to us, to sort of open this up to a dialogue with all of you and with our panelists and discussants as well. But I did just want to pick up. I'm glad that Larry raised that last point, because one of the things that I've heard recently is that we know that there's been a tremendous growth in the understanding of an application of nature-based solutions and the importance of nature-based solutions, and looking at the alternatives to hard engineered solutions, looking at nature-based solutions first and only getting to the engineered solutions if you absolutely have to. But I've heard a lot lately about the fact that with the impacts of climate change now being so disastrous and so impactful, people are starting to say, well, yeah, if I'm going to lose in some cases, my country, my entire island, and somebody comes along and says, I can save your island by building a seawall around it. Well, maybe that's better than moving to another country, relocating. And I wonder if this is going to be a challenge for nature-based solutions, to say, to what extent can nature-based solutions demonstrate that it can provide solutions to people at a scale and at a pace that's necessary? I'm just being a little bit provocative here and sort of throwing this out. But I think it's an interesting point. So let's open this up to some thoughts. I think
if I can
Tony,
kind of
wanted
respond
to
a little bit quickly first, though, before you open it, just say, again, I focus my remarks mostly on marine protected areas and ocean conservation, but there's a whole line of work, as you might imagine, after Hurricane Sandy, as my presentation said, around coastal adaptation and also considering nature-based fishing within the context of sea level rise and resilience and attitudes. I certainly, I was at a couple of early COPs, but I've been at the third COP, but the discussion of adaptation in the coastal environment is a topic that is blowing up at these conferences with loss and damage funds and issues about investment in infrastructure. So I think engaging that community, I think they are here, actually, in certain ways. Certainly in my community, we are having very, very robust discussions about how to be thinking about the role of nature-based features within defending coastal systems. That can be very different in an urban environment, but as was suggested, it may be equally significant to more isolated environments that might want some structural issues. So we are having those discussions, and I actually think in the context of this convention that actually is going to be an emerging issue, because I think there's going to be a very strong national reaction to defend, as well as an economic incentive for businesses to invest in defense. So I do think changing the paradigm, what is the economic motivation to invest in ecosystem protection, restoration, ecosystem services for themselves? I think they're going to face an increased threat in the future as a result of our function to adaptation. And because of what I think are going to be economic incentives to, I think, maybe value defense over ecological, certainly over retreat and many other options that have been offered. But that's just my concern. I didn't really focus on my remarks on that thing, but it's an issue that's very front and center in the area that I work.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, for investment, we can have the government investing. We can have also the private sector. And in the private sector, we have the philanthropists, and those invest already in the conservation of the nature. The problem is now with the financial sector, because they want returns on their investment. And this is why the economic valuation is important, because we can show them that those ecosystems are valuable. Now, we don't know if they are profitable. And we need more data. This is what we are trying to do the modeling. And this also is important when we consider the carbon credit, because for the moment, we have the carbon market like the ETS in Europe. We know the price of carbon. It's okay. But in the voluntary carbon market, we don't know. The price is going from $5 per ton to $100 per ton. If we look at the technological solutions, it will go to thousands dollar per ton. Sorry, I'm a bit tired this hour. And so meaning that the price of carbon is not right. At the moment, it is not. And this is the biggest problem. Now about engaging all the communities, because you talked about it, I think it is important to engage the local and indigenous population because they are the stewards of the nature. They are here to help this nature. My concern now is it a new colonialism to tell the developing country, you take care of the nature and we continue to pollute and then we offset our carbon. And this is something I'm thinking a lot because I'm hearing a lot here from people coming from the finance. I'm coming from the finance, but now I'm more in the nature and climate arena. But it is a bit scary when I hear that. So I'm thinking about this and the ethical problem too, because I'm a bit afraid that, we consider nature as valuable and it will bring greedy behavior from some people. I just want to address a question about engineer. I have an image. We have the planet is like a big bathtube. It is full of CO2. It's already full. We know we have to reduce our CO2 emissions, and this is the tap. We have to close the tap or to reduce it as much as possible. If we cannot reduce it enough, we have the residual CO2. We have to drain it. So we open the tap and we drain this CO2. We have two solutions, the nature-based solutions and the technology. But for the moment, from what I hear in the ocean, because I'm an ocean person, and the technology is not well understood yet. We still need resources. We still need research. And this is why I think that nature-based solutions are, for the moment, the best approach if it is well science-based and we evaluate it as economists, and then we try to explain why it is important to invest into the conservation and the restoration of the nature.
Thank you very much. So we do have someone in our audience who has a question. If you could just briefly introduce yourself, and then I think we've got a microphone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Catherine?
So I'm Alain Desbois from Canada, and with a company called Onika Technologies. And thanks for this very interesting panel. We're at the end of our journey here at the COP, and I would have liked to invite you all for dinner, but we have to fly in 6 hours from now. But continue the conversation, but maybe that's something we can do later on. To react to Larry's point, I think one perspective that is probably missing into this, and you brought it up, is the innovators, the change makers, the ones that bring the technology to this. This is what we do at Onika. We do wave-powered desalination solution, which is also looking at MPAs and coral reefs, artificial reefs component into our design of the systems. So when it comes the time for us to scale and bring the first project to scale, this is where it gets complicated because we need to build capacity. We need to build the bridges with the scientists to get the data, the impact measurements that the finance community will want, for us to raise significant amount of capital to do project financing, and eventually, get engaged with the World Bank and bilateral parties, and eventually get the community involved as well, into all that mix. So it's a huge burden for us as a private company to pave the way for designing new policies and permitting, process, and eventually getting the data and getting the science base on that. But I see all the pieces; they're all there. And now we're trying to approach this to work this in a system change approach. But to build this capacity needs cohesion and needs work and collaborations. And this is what we're trying to do. So I appreciate all the work and the experience you have. But yeah, I would like your advice on how to approach this as a company like ours. And we get support from the community. We're in Chile, we're in Canada, we're in the United States with projects. They're on the go right now, but I need to structure it properly for me to be able in 2-3 years to raise significant amount of capital to be deployed as solution globally and address this water scarcity, but also enabling local communities, to thrive and take advantage of the MPAs and translate that into the economic benefits of these communities as well. So would like your inputs on how this can be possibly and scale rapidly, because this is the time is of the essence here, I think, and the capacity to build scalable solutions like innovations that change your behaviors is quite important. So would like your reflections on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think the economists would have some ideas, but I've certainly heard some concepts of understanding what that baseline information is that you need, and maybe is a governmental role to de-risk your investment. So I do think there's something, what are the multiple benefits of some investment in some of the science and research and data that really has multiple benefits, and that would presumably de-risk your investment, so you'd have that information. So I do think that's a dialogue that maybe could be happening, not only with your governments, but also with some of your local partners who would benefit from this, so that they see the benefit of that. I mean, I hear a lot of discussion about investing in businesses, but I don't really hear as much investing in the science and information that I've heard statistics about the lack of investment in ocean data relative to land-based data, because that's something that they do very commonly in other spaces. So thinking about where in the ocean environment the innovation community can get together with the science and research community and the beneficiaries to sort of say, wait a second, the balance is off right now, and so there does need to be a little bit more governmental and public investment in some of these in order to enable this broader investment. But I'm a lawyer, so maybe I got that particularly wrong. Did I get that completely wrong?
No.
Okay.
I think we need in this space, we need all the disciplines. And this is the most important. If we want really to have the solution, we need the science, we need the economics, we need the law, because this is very important. What is still missing is regulation. I think this is something, it is really needed. When we talk about the carbon market, for example, we don't have regulation.
Well, regulation in the financial markets, but maybe we need to look at regulations to enable more innovation and pilots and projects. So if we're going to move the pace of change, we might need to remove some of those regulations and maybe regulate some of those incentives that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question, comment or answer to the gentleman who just spoke on finance. You might know about the IFC, the International Finance Corporation, which provides its loan, but it's very, very soft loan to the private sector, to companies such as yours, for innovation, and it's much faster than a World Bank loan, easier, and it's quicker. And so you might want to think about that. That's one aspect. The second one is that there are all sorts of loans by the World Bank. For instance, to the government of the Maldives, the new project is 175 million. And I don't know how they're using. That's for fisheries management, regional fisheries management, and climate change. So one of the things the government of Maldives is doing is, well, first they said, let's build seawalls. And, well, the bank said, no, that is not something that we would endorse. And now they want to do floating cities. You've heard of that, right? Floating cities, floating villages, and they have started the work. They are doing it with Dutch Docklands the Dutch company, where they have a ton of experience. Because in the Netherlands, you have floating cities, floating villages, and they are connected by roads, also built on columns. So that's costing a lot of money, but that's very attractive. Right now, it's like a tourist attraction, and there are investors already putting money in because they want to have this condominium under the sea. So somebody was asking, is that, like, will they float away? I mean, where will we end? But it won't really float away, but it has some leeway in, it's not going to float away, but it will shake a little bit with the waves, the storms, and so on. So it's still pilot. But anyway, the government has a lot of money if they want to contract you. They will contract you. But they will bid, so you have to have the experience. And so I just thought I'll convey that to you.
I was just at a World Ocean Congress in Sapporo, Japan. There were 4 papers from individuals talking about the work they were doing on designing and developing floating cities, floating platforms, floating communities, floating villages. It's quite interesting. Anyway, Catherine, I think you had a question, and then I think I saw a lady there, and then lady there.
Thank you very much. My name is Catherine Chabot, and I'm coming from France. I'm a member of the European Parliament, but I'm also a sailor and a co-founder of the Ocean and Climate Platform, and we organized a lot of events with the Global Ocean Forum with Biljana Tintinsen. That's why I was speaking about her in the previous side event. In the Parliament, and since a long time, I'm trying to push all ocean issues, and I took this mandate in the Parliament to trying to accelerate their implementation. So I'm working in several committees, development, environment, and fisheries, and it was very interesting I'm trying to push the blue carbon in the European legislation. It's very hard because we are a terrestrial continent. Not even if we add all our EEZ, we are probably the first economic zone in the world, but we are still very not turned to the sea. And I'm trying to push all ocean issues. And I've worked on several files, the fisheries agreement, and the blue carbon, and I've met, and it's a question, do you know the communitarian MPAs, les aires marines communautaires, Joal Fadius in Senegal? I've been twice in this, but there are a lot of it in Africa. Air marine communautaire, I don't know, communitarian communities of, yeah. It's very interesting because they are men fishermen and women aquaculture. They also made honey in those mangroves. They protect the mangroves. With them, I symbolically plant mangroves twice because I met them twice. It's very interesting. And so I don't know if you, and I'm trying to push this idea to develop those marine, air marine communautaire around the world. I'm part of the strategic committee, European Strategic Committee to develop the blue economy in our partnership between Europe and Africa. And we had the first Blue Africa Summit 2 weeks ago. It's very interesting that kind of integrated approach around the mangroves, etc. So do you know them? To finance the blue carbon, do you know the NOAH project, NOAH? What do you think about it? Because I know very well this project since 2 or 3 years, and it's hard to push to I think it's a really good idea to develop ocean-based indices, and in Europe we don't really, we are late compared to other states. So what do you think about this project if you know it? And the last question, the third question will be on the Blue Belt. Have you heard about this project pushed by the MedPan? The Blue Belt is the idea to connect all MPAs around the world, to connect MPAs managers around the world. So do you know this project? And I think inside MPAs we should have this integrated approach that we mentioned together.
Okay, thank you. So maybe a quick response to that, and then we'll go to the other two questions, because I'm watching the clock tick down here. But,
Yeah, thank you for the questions. I can start maybe, and then. Yeah, I know some of this project. I don't know them all. For example, in Senegal, I don't know it, but I know in French Polynesia, when I was there, it was interesting to see that the women were protecting those spaces. In fact, some people wanted to fish, and it was forbidden. And the women with the small boats, they went on the sea, and they said, "No, you don't." And it was funny, and this is something I think it is important. This is why local communities are very important. About the NDCs in Europe, I think, yes, you're right. Europe, they don't think on the ocean. But I'm French, but I'm working in Monaco, and for the Prince, the ocean is very important. So this is why my work is mainly on the ocean, and I work a lot on blue carbon. And for us, it is really important. Between Monaco, France, and Italy, there is one marine protected area, which is not really protected if we look well. It is Pelagos. And now they are trying to extend it because in 2025 we will have the UN Conference on the Ocean, and we want to show that we are doing something in this area as well in Nice, and this is pushed by the mayor. And I think maybe we should consider more, but for the moment what is missing is evaluation. So if we want to use the blue carbon as in NDCs, we need the economic valuation of those.
Do you know the know-how project?
I don't know it very well. I know the name, but yes.
They realize the mapping of the carbon, much on herbs than mangroves or salt marshes, but herbs. They create the economic system to put, and they convinced UN to put it.
Okay.
I would like to have scientists that they were there during the.
I will Google it and.
I can give
you
you
can
the contact.
send me.
I
Okay.
know well the guy was.
Okay,
You
great.
don't know. Okay.
No, I have seen this project because I'm working with the Saudi Arabia on a project on the mangroves, and we are evaluating their mangroves, and we are trying to see if it is worth to invest in not only the protection but also to have more mangroves in Saudi Arabia. So I think it will be interesting to look at this project. I just made a quick search, so I saw this project, but I haven't read really what is inside, so I cannot answer to a question. Sorry. Maybe
Okay.
my colleagues can better.
I'm going to take the two questions from here, and then if I can ask for the responses to both of them, because we're running out of time.
Okay, I'll make my question brief. I'm Leila Tai. I'm here with Northern Council for Global Cooperation. We are a non-government organization based in Whitehorse, Canada, but we do lots of programming in Canada and overseas with indigenous communities and local communities. My question is, it's quite broad. We see many benefits on nature-based solutions. I don't work in the ocean sphere, so I couldn't wrap my head around what nature-based solution is. But compared to gray infrastructure, we see many benefits of nature-based solutions. So in terms of accessing funding, adaptation fund and climate adaptation and mitigation for nature-based solutions, it seems to me it has made the line quite blurry between adaptation and mitigation. So for communities or subnational governments, when they want to access those fundings, how would you recommend them to brand their project, to make their proposal fit into under which one or both? How would you, what are your takes on that? I'm not sure if my question is clear enough.
Okay,
clear.
so while you think on that, we'll take the last question over here, and then
Should I respond?
just keep it very brief.
Yeah.
In a minute.
Peter?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll keep my question brief. I'm Sharmin Sharamim from Bangladesh. I come from my organization, SCI International. We work with youth involvement in climate justice. So my question to Dr. Indu, she mentioned that World Bank has fund, 1.3 billion funds, but most countries, they don't know about these funds. So, and she is telling about the program, how to access those funds to enable people. So what are the capacity building activities World Bank has, and also do you have any program for local projects that they know about these funds and how they can access those funds? For example, if we say Green Climate Fund, local projects, they cannot access the funds directly, they have to go through so much processes, they don't know about this process. So yeah, so if I make it short, what kind of programs do you have for the local projects? Thank you.
Okay. So, Indu, you wanted to respond to both, I think.
You first. I hope I won't forget the other one, other question. No, for local community, local NGOs, rather than the World Bank, it's too complicated, perhaps, and also it has to come through the government. The loan is to the government, and the government then in turn has to contract or disburse to a local NGO, which they may or may not do. They might give it to the friends, as you know. But there are small grants which are available from the GEF. There's UNDP GEF, which gives small grants that would be from 25,000 US to 50,000. And you asked about adaptation, mitigation. I mean, they're both. But adaptation right now is the key word that they use. For instance, there's a project that I myself helped, a local NGO in Zanzibar, they got, I think, 30,000 US for a community group called ZASKI. That's Zanzibar Sustainable Coastal Initiative. No, Seaweed Initiative, ZASKI. That's the acronym. You might find it online. You can Google it. Dr. Flower Masuya is the chairperson of it. She's a marine biologist, quite well known in the seaweed community in Africa. So anyway, we helped them, I helped them to get this grant. It's a grant, and it should be enough to, for a startup or something. That might be a way to go. It's a GEF UNDP, Small Grants Program. And then to answer your question about the World Bank's $1.3 billion, it's called the Climate Investment Fund. So some of us work to ask the bank to streamline this. You're very right that people don't understand, people don't even know about it. let alone how to access. So in response, the World Bank now disburses through regional development banks. So you know the Asian Development Bank. So you probably have an office of the regional, ADB. So you could go there and they will explain the process. It's not as complicated as going to the World Bank directly. So you go to the ADB, there should be a process, a form to fill up, and you can't just say, oh, we want money for climate change adaptation. No, you have to say where and for what, and what will be the impact, what will be the benefit to the community, what is the process for dispersing to the communities. All that will have to be, it's natural. You go to a bank and then you ask, oh, we need X amount of money to do this business or that. They will also ask you, what is it that you want? So you have to explain that. But that's the process.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm afraid we're out of time, but I'd like to thank our panelists, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming in the last minutes of the last hours of the last days of the last week of COP. Thank you very much for being here, and let's give our panelists a round of applause, and also to all of you for being here. Thank you.
Did some of you work online? Could I find it if I track you down or something?
Thank you.
Some of you work, can I find it?